Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We are continuing our run through of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We're up to the episodes called Past Tense Part 1 and 2. The first one aired January 2nd, 1995. It's the 11th episode of the third season, and teleplay goes to Robert Hewitt Wolfe. Story goes to Ira Steven Behr, Robert Hewitt Wolfe. Directed by Reza Badi'i, I think is how you pronounce that name. The second part aired January 9th, 1995, the 12th episode of the third season. Teleplay goes to Ira Steven Behr and Renee Echevarria. Ira Steven Behr and Robert Hewitt Wolfe get the story credit. Directed by Jonathan Frakes in his last directing credit for DS9, which actually got him the First Contact gig. In this episode, trapped 300 years in the past, Cisco, Bashir, and Dax find themselves confronting one of the darkest hours in Earth's history, and Cisco must risk all to see that the Bell Riots reach their inevitable conclusion, even if it means sacrificing his life. We're joined by Clay. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. This episode might be the first instance of science fiction very accurately predicting the future, because this was way too fucking real.
You just need a couple years. You know what the most remarkable thing is? They predicted the 1999 Yankees world champions.
Did they really?
Yeah.
I must have missed that.
Yep. When they're talking about baseball in the second episode, I think they said that they're comparing whether or not the Yankees 99 team was better than like the 2016 LA Kings or whatever team they made up for. But the Yankees actually went on to win that year, and I think that's one of the Yankees team that's considered like one of the best teams that they ever had. But I might be wrong about that.
Yeah. The other thing was that, like, if this had been like 2049 or like 2070 or something, it might not have been that weird, but it was 2024, which is very close.
Yes, it's very, very close. This
and is a not entirely impossible projection from where we're headed right now.
I have a lot to say about this one. I'll before we go to the break, I'll just say that this episode probably features the most shotgun cocking out of any Star Trek episode. I think there's a lot of shotguns. Is that why
Frakes got the job for First Contact after they saw his great shotgun work? Because there's a lot of good shotgun work in First Contact.
A lot of people tossing rifles to each other dramatically,
yes.
Which is an important part of an action movie. All right, so we're going to take a break. We'll play an audio clip, and me and Clay will come back, and we'll break down Past Tense.
Every building we go to is the same story. They can't all be full.
Don't be so sure. One of the main complaints against the sanctuary districts was overcrowding. It got to the point where they didn't care how many people were in here. They just wanted to keep them out of sight.
And once they were out of sight, what then? I mean, look at this man. There's no need for him to live like that. With the right medication, he could lead a full and normal life.
Maybe in our time.
Not just in our time. There are any number of effective treatments for schizophrenia. Even in this day and age. They could cure that man now, today, if they gave a damn.
It's not that they don't give a damn. They've just given up. The social problems they face seem too enormous to deal with.
That only makes things worse. Causing people to suffer because you hate them is terrible. But causing people to suffer because you have forgotten how to care, that's really hard to understand.
They'll remember. It will take some time and it won't be easy. But eventually people in this century will remember how to care.
Oddly, Clay, and all the stuff I was reading about it, I didn't see this confirmed. I'm fairly sure this is the last DS9 episodes that are called Part 1 and Part 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so in the future, they have single episodes that are double length, but they're not two-parters. They just aired them at the same time. And there's no more Part 1, Part 2. I looked over the episode list and I didn't see one. I think that's right, but that's a change that's going to go forward as the series gets more serialized and everything. But Past Tense is... I'm very conflicted about Past Tense. I think that it is... I guess I'll just open it up by saying, like, starting with the third season of DS9, it's been an extremely cynical run of episodes. basically every episode has been about challenging sort of previous episodes' ideas, whether it's in the episode that the Abandoned and stuff like that, like you can't change people. There have been things like The Search, which has shown that the Federation is willing to like sort of abandon their beliefs or at least give up too much to be able to keep the peace. And Past Tense is the most Star Trek-y. If you were to describe the cliche of what Star Trek is, Past Tense is probably that episode that comes in. I still feel it's DS9-y on some level, which we'll get into, but it's kind of shocking to me how abruptly it changes from the episodes that we've seen going into this one. And I think I look at this episode and regard it less because of how it flip-flops back to this sort of utopian hopefulness. Well, it portrays a very negative situation. It's odd that they go back to characters sort of monologuing about like, this is the values that we have and stuff like that. It felt like a dated Star Trek episode on some level.
Yeah, excuse me. I can see what you mean. I didn't really mind it that much though, because I think that they still exist in that world where that is the ideal. You know, it's not explicitly the voice of the writers coming through. You know, the people who come from that future world are going to look back on this world, our current world, and look at it in a much more uncivilized way, regardless of what's going on at their present time in the future. And also, I think it's important that most of that is voiced by Bashir, who is, you know, the Star Trekiest character on the show. And he says that he has a line in this that he doesn't even want to. He didn't want to study this time in history because it was too depressing for him. So yeah, he's the quintessential Star Trek character who is appalled by what has gone on in the past. Yeah, he's got a good monologue in the first episode, you know, which is just sort of like you were saying, the laying out of the distaste for the end, and also hopefulness for the future. So yeah, I guess it didn't really bother me that much, especially because the more cynical nature of this show has only started to really creep in for me. Yep. And again, that's all stuff that's happening currently in their future. I mean, like, if you were to, it's very easy to take the world we're in now, and, you know, as shitty as some things might be, and you can still look back and go like, well, you know, it was a lot shittier back then. Yes. Yep. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So yeah, I guess that didn't really bother me. This definitely did feel like the most Star Trek-y episode we've seen in a while, if only because it was sort of like an inversion of City on the Edge of Forever. Yeah, it's an inversion of that episode. I was reading something that was like, they send the exact same crew people in each episode. It's the doctor, science officer, and the captain who go down, which is kind of an odd. R.I.P. Harlan Ellison. Right, that's true. Yeah, Harlan Ellison actually passed away, and I saw the most shade throwing like eulogies for him online. It's like he was a real asshole sometimes, but he's also could have been a really great guy at other times. It's like, wow, that's deep. The thing about the away team mixture seems like a direct homage to City on the Edge, and City on the Edge this is an inversion of City on the Edge, because this has our characters actively have to involve themselves in history, right? In a way that City on the Edge was all about avoiding doing that, and the sacrifice on Kirk's part was to just not do anything, despite the horror that he's seen before. This is a very different take on that, which seems to imply the fact that this show doesn't think that history will sort itself out. People have to people have to make the change to do it, and it's not just going to be you let fate take hold and whatever may be will be the best way forward, which is kind of a TOS-y perspective on it. True, but they also only get involved, well, arguably they only get involved because that one guy gets killed. Yes. So they do fuck things up and then have to fix it. Although, again, there's no guarantee that... I mean, it's a paradox, because there's no way of knowing whether or not the guy who gets killed, who is, what's his name, Bell? Gabriel Bell. There's no way of knowing whether or not that Gabriel Bell actually did all that stuff, or if it was just Cisco using the name Gabriel Bell because of, it's one of those time loop paradox things.
Right. Well, yeah. In other words, was Cisco always Gabriel Bell?
Exact. Yes.
Yeah. Which I think the episode, I would be more inclined to think that's the case, because not just because of the ending, but they never show you never see a picture of Bell beforehand. You never, that it feels like that would have been something they would have, Cisco would have pulled it up on a data pad or something, or maybe not them, but they would have looked it up in another episode and been like, this is Gabriel Bell. This is what he's going to do.
I would say the evidence to the contrary is that when they do pull up a picture at the end, he's like, oh shit, Starfleet's going to be pissed about this. So I guess it's a coin flip which way you want to take it.
That's true. Yeah, I guess it's it could go either way. I think it's more interesting if Cisco was always Bell at that point.
Yeah.
Although,
sorry, this is just stupid details. I mean, it gets to the heart of my problem with these episodes, which I really liked generally, but I think the ending is just like it's like you're telling a story to your kids, and then like they have to go to sleep right now, so you have to finish the story right now.
Yeah.
Because like they get past all the action and all the important stuff, and then they're just back on the ship. He just happens to be Bell. It's over now.
Yeah. We've altered history irrevocably, apparently, but everything turned out. It's the Simpsons episode where Homer's happy enough with the very end, where the family has like lizard tongues or something. They're close enough to not making a mistake there. The past tense actually, I find it kind of boring. I think that, well, before I get into that, I just want to say that for whatever reason, the episode strongly reminds me of Terminator 2 for some reason.
I think it's all the shotguns.
Well, I think it's the shotguns, and the set looks like a budget rate Cyberdyne office.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I always imagine one of the guys just holding the dead man trigger bomb, going like, can't hold this. But
it does feel. And you've got the. I was gonna say ice, but you've got ice showing up at the end to shoot everybody up like in Terminator 2. So that's fairly similar.
Exactly.
But this episode does suffer from post RoboCop 90s future disease quite a bit. Where it's like, everybody's wearing like jumpsuits and everything's made out of cement and gray and stuff. It's very much in that 90s cheap budget future thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's very, you could say it's maybe inspired by Verhoeven, his sort of RoboCop design, but I think it's mostly a necessity of budget that they can't really do anything with it.
Well, no, I mean, it's just like, I think we talked about it when we talked about both Total Recall and RoboCop. They influenced the future design of everything because you could do it so cheaply.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think that you see that look in a lot of 90s low budget sci-fi stuff where it's just like jumpsuits and patches and like gray rooms with like one computer in them.
And I think all of those things, and maybe a big theme of the 90s stuff, was that the government is going to basically take over your life. Like in RoboCop, it's like the company is the government basically, and so that they will be able to take your rights away from you. This one, it's basically the world has been undone by government bureaucracy. Basically, like the everything that they have to do in these episodes is fill out forms, wait in line, you'll meet with somebody, maybe they'll get you something, maybe they won't. It's not even really a actively antagonistic Terminator dystopia. It's really just a world that is not particularly free and enabling people to do what they want to do. It's just you're mired in this muck of not being able to get anywhere, and the government doesn't seem to care. And my problem with the episode is that I think it's almost, how we're saying it's more of a Star Trek episode, I think it's too sledgehammery. Like the worst part of it for me is the Dax is there basically because she has to find them later on. But the storyline they stick her in is a story that's like, now you're going to spend some time with a parody of rich people.
Yes.
And, it's people drinking wine and talking about like classical music. And it doesn't feel
on a planet that's entirely gambling and horse racing.
Right, exactly. And I just thought it was was stuck a little bit there, and I think that it's stuck a little bit in that the show can't be as dark as I think they want it to be. I think this storyline is incredibly dark, but the tone of Star Trek undersells it. Mostly, I think that guy's name is BC, the guy who looks like Bono from U2. The ghost, who someone put that on Discord, but the ghost, to me, should be a terrifying character, I think, and he's not in this. He's kind of a goofball.
Well, again, they nailed it pretty hard by putting all the douchebags in fedoras.
Yes,
so.
Yep. Hatted. Cisco likes his hat, though, or he doesn't like his hat, which makes it fitting, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I found it more, one of the reasons that I found it more believable was because their future was basically just, it's not robots running the world, and it's not, Logan's Run. It's just like paperwork. And if your paperwork doesn't match up, then you're fucked.
Yeah.
And that seemed fairly plausible to me. And while I totally agree that that it is fairly sledgehammery, that divide rang kind of true to me. Especially the part where the one guy was talking about how Europe was falling apart.
Right. Yes, there's
too many things in this episode where I was like, these guys are shockingly close. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. It is kind of boring. And like, I was kind of tickled by the fact that or past, but our future was just like sitting at the DMV for all day. And then if you don't have your correct paperwork up, you got to go live in the shantytown or something like that.
Yep.
Because it was depressing, but believable, and not. I didn't think it was that over the top, really. But yeah, I enjoyed it while I was watching it, but as I'm thinking back on it, it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, there's not really a lot going on. Like anything that's not in the Sanctuary City thing is just like a waste of fucking time. It's fun watching Kira and O'Brien like zip zap to different time periods, but it's like the only reason we're cutting back to these guys at all is because we need a way to get out of here at the end. And even then they half-ass it by not even showing you how they do it.
No, they apparently they can delay the transporter and then find them and go back with them. That didn't make I like the O'Brien and Kira stuff mostly because I find the other stuff to be sort of a drag on. Like, I don't know if this episode would have benefited or been worse if it was just a one-parter, to maybe just cut down on the O'Brien and Kira rescue stuff and really focus on the Bell issue. But to me, the stuff in the Sanctuary City where Cisco becomes Bell, I feel like they don't really talk about what's going on in the episode. They moralize it at the start, where they explain, Bashir and Cisco explain everything that's going on and like how far we've come as like humans, and like maybe we'll fall back, a little bit of foreshadowing for the future of the series, like how will the Federation react to this if they realize that they haven't done the right thing? Like, are we better people? Which is the DS9 take, I think, is that the people are the primary drivers of stuff, in a way that the other series seem to think that humanity, TNG particularly, seem to think that humanity is pretty much perfect. We just had these problems getting in our way. And once we got through them, utopia was born. Where DS9 takes a little bit of a more mature take, I think, which is that people were the cause of problems, and it's a constant struggle to be better than your problems and to be better people. And I think that the episode nails that aspect, but they don't really talk about it. I feel like Cisco buys into what he has to do very easily. He's like, yeah, I have to assume this guy's mantle. Like, I have to become Gabriel Bell. That doesn't feel right to me. I don't know if Cisco's motivations and his sort of like drive for what he wants to do makes sense out of the fact that he knows this has to happen. There's no discussion of why they're doing this and what's the right thing to do and how they're going to come out of it in the end and be better.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like, at least it seems to me anyway, like it's a matter of that instance being much like in First Contact, a very defining moment where the humanity comes out of it on the other end, or on its way back up. He kind of just has to do it because he knows it needs to be done. I don't know how much. I don't know. Would it really have benefited if they had like talked about it?
I think so, because I think that what they did was like the line you have to draw here is whether or not you talk about this or you have an action episode. And I think that they aired somewhere in the middle where neither one of those aspects is really good. You know, like there's not enough action to be excited by it, and there's not enough of the sort of thought about what's going on. And, you know, on the side of if you're not going to discuss it, do you think that I'm sort of left unimpressed by the Bell Riots a little bit. Like, I'm surprised that was the turning point that changed everything. In a world that seems like it is mired in bureaucracy and that people don't really know what's going on, it seemed like a pretty small issue that they had to deal with. It's basically a hostage situation that
it
gets
only
resolved.
lasts like a day or something, right?
Yeah, no, I think they say it takes place over the course of a week, but I only got the impression it was a day at most.
Yeah, it felt like to me, I mean, obviously it's a budgetary thing where you have to spend most of your time in that one room. You can't show like 10,000 people rioting. But I think they tried to cover themselves a little bit afterwards when they came out and the street
bodies
was littered with dead bodies. And my impression was that like this was a thing that happened that was so bad where so many people were killed that they had, you know, basically there was no choice but to address it afterwards and fix it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can see what you're saying. I think overall the mechanics of this episode are not very tight.
In terms
I thought
of
the first episode. What's that?
What do you mean in terms of that? Just the sort of the structure of it, or do you mean like the general idea?
Just the general idea. I think the idea itself is fine, but as you're saying, it's like the actual deconstructing of how things happen and the logistics of things doesn't really hold up super well, especially going into the end, where they just kind of quickly breeze through everything, and like the Dax thing with her buddy who's just like, yeah, no, I'll help you sneak in through the sewers to get into this place.
Most boring businessman ever, I think, would be his description.
Like that stuff was just, I don't know, it was not very engaging, and it was just,
I thought he was going to have a bigger impact. The way
me too.
The amount of time that they spent with him made it seem like he was going to be either like politically involved or he would be the motivating factor that could possibly change things, and he's really not. He just helps Dax.
There's literally a scene where they cut to Dax and she's just asleep in his office.
Yeah. And it's when she gets paged on the communicator, right? She's she's just like passed down his office. Yeah, I don't, or I was expecting more of to tie into the Terminator when he like reveals that he's like, oh, you probably know who I am. I'm very important. I was expecting some sort of Star Trek future to be tied into that, and I don't think it is.
Or at least some sort of piece of the puzzle of the Bell Riots.
Yeah,
you know, or something that comes after it or something like that.
Yeah.
I just think that stuff was, I think they were really interested in the Sanctuary City stuff to the point where everything else was just sort of like, you know, well, we just have to have these other people here, and they didn't really think through much of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you just
also, to go back to the ending, like the actual handoff, like I was the whole episode, I was trying to think, okay, so obviously Cisco is not going to be Bell. It has to do with this card that they have, right? Who's he going to hand the card off to? I thought he was going to give it to, what's his name? The guy with the family who got killed.
Oh, Webb or something?
Yeah, because they set him up as much more of a revolutionary.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, maybe the switch will be that guy gets killed, and so he goes, oh, his name was Gabriel Bell. But he had a family, so obviously that would be kind of tough. But they end up just being like, yeah, just give me that card. I'll just put it on one of the dead bodies.
Yeah.
Then if they did that, why do they have a picture of Cisco in the future?
Right. Yeah. That's the... Yeah, or you'd be like, I have to go find some horribly burned remains or something. And
yeah, not to mention everybody who's in this thing is like fingerprinted and databased, right?
Yeah.
So whoever they put that card on is not going to match up with what their fingerprints in their database or whatever it says.
Yes.
So it's like, you know, it's it's a thing like, you know, like I said, at the end they felt like, well, shit, we got to wrap this up somehow. So they just kind of speed through all the specifics of paying off their time travel story with stuff that on the surface goes, oh, that's clever, but then you think about it and go, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, maybe the problem I have with it is that it is, to me, the opposite of City on the Edge, where after City on the Edge ends, I'm like, oh, like that's something to think about. I don't really think about anything about this episode after it's concluded itself. It's like, yeah, they all got home, whatever. But TOS said it's a great tragic ending for TOS.
Even they don't think about anything about it when they get back. It's like they get back to the station. It's just like, whew, that was weird.
Yeah,
you know, like there's no it's City on the Edge of Forever kind of makes you think about stuff that happened and the consequences of things and history and all that kind of stuff. And this one is just sort of like their theme is we got to be better. Well,
Cisco has no sacrifice. Right, to fix the solution or to get the outcome he wants, he doesn't have to really give up anything. And I think that's kind of a problem.
There's no real pressure on him. Like even like now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of the stuff is not really sticking for me. Like the way that Dax gets back her communicator badge, she just goes to Clint Howard and is like, "Could I have that back?"
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, no problem. And like that's it. Why even do that if you're just gonna have her get it back that easily? That should be kind of a big, especially if you're pulling this across 2 parts, you'd think that would be like a bigger thing.
Yeah, just for the cameo, right? Just to have Clint Howard in there, which is irrelevant. But I agree. It kind of feels to me, maybe it's like 1.5 amounts of episode, and it just feels that they had to stretch it to get to the full 2. And I think it kind of doesn't hold up, even though I really like the idea. Like I sound like I'm super negative on it, but I really like the idea of these are the Bell Riots are this thing that happened. We'll get into Patron comments about where this actually happens in like correlation to World War III, which is not something that I'm not particularly up to date on, but because Khan would have been around this time too, I think, or he was early 90s maybe. So it's been a little bit since Khan, and so the world after the Superman has apparently turned into a bureaucracy. And I think you're right. Like the best part of it is how accurately they've kind of picked a future that seems pretty plausible at this point. Yeah. It's kind of, they say sanctuary towns. They're not really related to sanctuary cities as we consider it now in modern age. Like the problem isn't the same, but it's the same kind of lingo. The fact that the bureaucracy has taken over, people are very afraid of big government's always a fear of people at some point. And then just
people coming to the city looking for jobs, and they end up in a detention camp.
Yes, right. And I think that up here in New England, we don't deal with it as much as somewhere in like California, where these shows are made, where there's actually a homeless problem, like actual homeless cities being built up under underpasses and stuff. So it's apparently that was a big concern when this episode was written that impacted everything. But we don't really see that. People in California can probably comment on that more than I can. The worst thing that we have is Cambridge, right? Basically, like that's the Cambridge kind of has that problem, although it's a little bit different, I guess. It's not quite the same like mass of people. It's just aggressive panhandlers. So and I think that the idea is good. I was a little, I don't know, like that idea of being sort of a mellow problem. I don't know if it serves the story. Like it's sad and tragic that people are living in these tent cities, but everyone seems kind of okay there. Like they basically feel like they just got laid off from their job and are looking for a place to sit around for a little while. And I think that the desolation and the desperation of the tent city kind of conflicts with the fact that they're just all waiting in line to get jobs on some level. I don't know. It doesn't feel emotionally loaded enough for me to really invest myself in it.
Yeah, I think what's missing, and I think we've run into this problem a couple times when they try to do stuff like this that has some like beef to it, is there's no bearing on the future, really. I mean, other than the literal bearing on the future, there's no like, I was thinking about how if they had set this up that Cisco and Bashir and Dax got caught in this transporter thing on the way to dealing with something that this experience could help Cisco look at in a different light, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have really beefed things up quite a bit, I think. Whereas as opposed to, it's just like, yeah, we're going back to Earth. We're going to meet this guy. Whoops, we screwed up. And it's all kind of, it's a sort of cavalier way of handling a fairly, dour situation.
Yeah.
That in the end really doesn't have any weight to it because they all just kind of brush it off as like another day at the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would have, I think it would have been nice if they had bookended it with some sort of like experiencing what they did in the past has changed Cisco's mind about how to deal with X in the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I feel that that's more appropriate for this series at this level.
Yeah.
Like I feel like a lot of the episodes are ending with that kind of reflection that the tone, as you're saying here, the ending is kind of just played off as a joke. It's like, wow, fuck, shit. Like I'm Gabriel Bell now. That'll be tough one to explain that one to the bosses. And they also pair it with the Kira and O'Brien stuff, as you were saying, which is it's really just a humor. It's a gag, basically,
right.
to have them go to different times and sort of interact with the different time places.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked the Kira and O'Brien stuff just because it was at least a little bit of a break from the boredom of the Bell stuff. I thought it was maybe it was tonally inconsistent and didn't make a lot of sense. And Kira's attitude and O'Brien's attitude, they're like, well, we got 10 places, but we can only make 5 jumps, so we'll flip a coin, and then he just picks randomly the last one.
That was preposterous.
Right. There's
like why even do that? Why don't you just keep them on the ship and just have them work through it, some other way?
Right.
I mean, obviously, it's fun to send them down and whatever, but.
The whole lead up to it is pure technobabble. Everything O'Brien says in this is just made up words, basically, until he gets to the very end. So why not have him come up with a solution where at the last moment in time, he's able to figure out what time period he actually sent them to, and they go down there, because it would have killed the gag. And I think maybe in another episode, I actually would have liked the gag even more. I kind of like it for what it is, but they only go to 2 episodes, I think, or 2 time places, and it's like the hippies and the swing era.
Yeah, the 20s, yeah.
The roaring 20s.
I mean, if he had just stayed on the ship and repolarized the defibrillatrix, I think it would have been fine.
Yeah, obviously, because the Chiron particles had fallen apart, and there's only a limited.
I think you mean the temporal displacement actuator.
O'Brien should have just done the Dyson Dead Man Switch thing. Can't hold this.
Yeah.
Let's see. Did you have what did you? It's funny. I'm almost feel like I've run out of stuff to talk about it, but I don't think a lot happens in this episode. This is the Bell Riots. To me, as a fan of the series, the Bell Riots are always held up as a bigger event than I feel that they actually are, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them the way that they are. But this is not Khan taking over the world type of stuff. Yeah. This is not World War III, which we see in First Contact. We see the outcome of that. So you're familiar with you've seen all those. You've seen the Khan episode, you've seen this, and you've seen First Contact. Is it a problem for you? Is the consistency between these visions a problem for you, or do you even think about it?
I hadn't really thought about it, but I think looking at the Bell Riots, the tough part for me is, I think one of the problems is I'm not totally sure of the scale of this problem.
Right.
Because I just assumed it was a national thing, but it sounded like at some points that it was just San Francisco. So I couldn't quite get a handle on like how big this problem was, because in the end it's like, let's say this is a national thing, right? Like these sanctuary areas are all around the country.
I didn't even realize that America was existing. I didn't even think about that at that point, because they mentioned Europe, but I didn't know if this was actually still America or if it was
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if these sanctuary things are all around the country, this feels like it should have been a bigger. Like the one blip in one spot doesn't seem like it would be enough to take them all down.
Yeah.
And at the same time, though, if it's just San Francisco, Like, that was what was kind of weird, because they were like, oh, well, I don't know, we'll talk to the governor about possibly shutting this down.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's not the president involved in this.
Yeah, it was just the governor. So I guess it was a small scale thing. And
well, to fit the theme, it'll be Schwarzenegger in his 6th term as governor of California then, right? Yeah. There we go. That's how you fit T2 into this. Sorry,
there
go
you
ahead.
go. Yeah. No, it's just the scope of it was kind of weird. And also, again, I think it's specifics. It feels like it's not a thoroughly thought through concept, because I think at some point someone actually says this, and I'm inclined to agree with them. It's like, well, they're not just going to shut this shit down because of one riot.
Right.
You know? And I mean, I guess the flip side of that is, well, everybody gets to see the people who are in there, and then they see these people get slaughtered by the National Guard.
Yeah.
Who looked very, I guess in the future, the National Guard is like a commando force, which wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah. Crosby, Stills, and Nash would have a harder time saying San Francisco instead of Ohio or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all might still be alive. But yeah, I think it was talked. This whole thing was kind of considered in such a superficial way that I think it's difficult to really feel the actual scope of the consequences of what happens here, other than people saying, "Oh, this was a big deal."
You know what I think the problem is? I think it comes back to the Dax storyline. The Dax storyline should have shown a extent of the problem that showed how detached the wealthy were from caring about it. And I didn't really get that
they were all
sense.
Drinking champagne and laughing. That's
right.
The universal symbol for detached.
And then they did a hard cut to a person in a tent, and that is you just supposed to realize, but that came across as just a parody. Like, there was not that didn't feel like that was a real enough world for me to understand how these people have just started ignoring. Because as Bashir says in this, the problem isn't that people are being cruel to each other, it's that they don't care about it. Like, they are, it's their indifference that's really the heart of the problem here. And the fact that the character Dax meets does care is kind of a problem. And the fact that they don't really seem to be concerned about the sanctuary cities. When they talk about the sanctuary cities, they aren't talking about like, oh, it's good that this is happening and this is the best way forward. It's more of they just, it's like they're talking about the DMV on some level. Maybe that's a disconnect, but I don't know.
And there's no discussion at all that like this thing is starting to boil over or like tensions are running really high. It's just sort of like, it's just what it is. What it is.
Or I've installed a new security system because I don't know what's going to happen with these, with the people who just can't get their lives together, that kind of thing. Like, there should have been more. There should have been more of an aggressive anger towards the sanctuary cities from the Dax storyline, I think.
Yeah, or if not an aggressive anger, at least more of a concern about what's about them. Because I mean, that's really what it is, isn't it? Like, concern
in a lack of concern way, a concern about their own problem. You know what I mean? Like, they shouldn't be concerned about the people, but concerned about their own welfare.
Yeah, these things, it never comes down to like anger about these things. It's always the people who are on the outside see all the people on the inside getting uppity because they, can't appreciate what they have.
Right.
And so it's never an anger thing. It's for whatever reason. It's like, well, you oppressed people need to, be more thankful for what you do have. And there was none of that really. And there was no sense that the walls of the sanctuary city were kind of like being really pressed,
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that would have been a good way to really put a little bit more meat behind the Bell Riot. Because I mean, if you think about it, if everything's fine generally, right? I mean, there's a sense of nobody wants to be there clearly, but if everything seems kind of fine when you're there, which it sort of does, like it's a shitty place, don't get me wrong, but it's like there's no real pressure against the authority.
No, there's still a sliver of hope. The government still seems to be trying, but they're just terrible at it, right? So it's not like they've just built a cage and thrown them in them. They're trying to get them jobs, and obviously they're not doing a good enough work at that, and they're not providing for them. But it is not an internment camp. It doesn't come
Right.
across that way to me. It just comes across as kind of an odd holding place to go to. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think if they had gone full internment camp, it would have felt more cliche.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it is sort of this weird, like, nebulous limbo feels a little bit more believable and a little bit more accurate. But at the same time, it's like there's the pressure from inside this bubble did not feel like it was at a high point when this riot happens. It
Right.
feels like it was just another day at the DMV, and then one guy in the line at the DMV just starts yelling Attica. You know?
Right. Yeah. They should have snuck that in somehow. I think. Yeah. I think that's probably my main issue with it. I think that it's just it doesn't sell.
Do people
the
still
urgency.
get that reference?
Attica?
I only know that reference secondhand, so I don't know. I don't know if anybody actually knows what that means anymore.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a very long time. I think it's one of those like college films that I've that you kind of pass through, and it's kind of like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari for me.
And we're not going to tell you what movie it is if you don't know what we're talking about, because you're going to have to find it yourself and watch it.
It's called Attack of the Clones. You guys can
Yes.
find. Yeah, that's pretty much. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about? I feel like I don't have much to say about this one, but I guess it's. I don't know. I have a hard time with it. I didn't really enjoy watching it, so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Did you have anything you want to say before we go to final thoughts? I feel like I'm at the end of what I have to talk about.
Not really. I mean, just kind of calling back to what we were talking about before. I really like that Bashir speech where he was talking about what would the Federation do if presented with this kind of thing, and I think that's why I feel like they needed to have some sort of other way to make it relevant to what was going on, other than just musing about, well, what would we do if the Federation was in the similar thing, you know? Because I thought that speech was good. And I think that speech gets better if Cisco has something on his mind that he's dealing with where he is faced with this problem, you know? Or not literally this problem, but something where the events of this, the past here influence his way of thinking about things in the future.
Yeah, to me that line rang funny because it felt to me like after they shot this episode, the writers were like, you know what, that line? That's a good line. We should do something with that line. Because that's kind of the point of the series in the future seasons, really.
Oh, okay.
So to me, it felt a little bit maybe too obvious. It was and I don't think that they knew this at the point, so it wasn't that like they were stating their thesis right in this episode, and they're like, we're going to go forward with this. I feel they just kind of retconned themselves into wanting to talk about that. Yeah, that's it. Well, we'll take a break. We'll play an audio clip. We'll come back. We'll read some patron thoughts. The patrons, I think, like this one more than me, so maybe we'll have some interesting discussions. Then we'll give our ratings, and we'll call it a day.
So what do we do with him?
I don't know.
You could let us go.
All right. Vin! They saved our lives back there.
How can we explain what happened to them?
Give me your ID cards.
Huck it.
We'll switch these for 2 of the casualties. As far as anybody knows, you both died here. Is that okay with you, Bell?
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Come on, let's get you out of here.
Anything else we can do for you?
There is one more thing.
Name it.
Tell people the truth about what happened here.
I would have done that anyway.
All right, everybody. So if you support the show on the patreon.com/the Pensky File, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them on the podcast and react to them, so we'll do that now. Stephen Cobb, past tense. I think this is the most blatant social commentary Star Trek episode since Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, the half-black, half-white alien TOS episode. That aside, I enjoyed the episode. The first half was a bit slow in starting, but it paid off in the second. I don't think it could have been a one episode because of how much setup was necessary. I thought the interpretation of the BC character was great, though I do not know if it was intentional or coincidental, a kind of so bad it's good thing. The weird, stilted, cheesy, awkward bluster felt like the perfect match for BC. I don't think you commented on BC. I didn't like him. What did you think? BC is the hat-wearing ghost who is kind of the third party of like the taking hostages.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really care about that guy. He was not believably violent.
Right.
You know, like they're like you were saying, the ghost should have been a little bit more scary.
It's the most for the per capita of shotguns in this. I never felt like anyone was going to actually shoot anybody with their shotgun.
Yeah, and I mean, the dude's wearing a fedora with the brim folded up like he's from a 1920s serial or something.
It does
and
look like
he's
the
talking
album.
Like, I don't think I'm going to go over here and shoot nobody. You know, it's kind of hard to take that seriously.
It is. Yeah, it's they do look like U2's Joshua Tree, the album art. Yeah. That is what they do look like.
I really hope I hope there's a deleted scene after he gives his hat to the kid. I really hope there's a deleted scene where the kid walks out and immediately throws that in the trash.
That guy was a pussy. Christian Pouch says, past tense always had a soft spot for these episodes, and I feel like it's more relevant now than it was at the time, and unsettlingly so. It's a bit on the nose, but I don't think it ever crosses the line into being unbearably preachy, as opposed to something like TNG's Force of Nature, which is insufferably self-righteous. I think the episode balances the tone with some of Cisco's dialogue, explaining the reasons for why things got to this point, and how things are going to be turned around for the better because of it. I think if this were TNG, Picard would be visibly disgusted with everyone of the period, and would take every opportunity to preach at them. I'm glad that we have Cisco here instead.
I wish we had Picard, just because you know that you could tell he was all in when he lost a couple buttons on his shirt.
Right.
Because that's like how you can tell Picard is rebellious when you see the chest hair.
Sisko's the most cynical or pessimistic, I guess, out of all of it. So his interactions with these kind of storylines are different. And you know, this is kind of a tangent here. Maybe I'll do this as my non sequitur now, but I was thinking, you know how the captains always get compared, and there's always a battle for the captains about them? I was thinking about it. The more interesting comparison are the first officers, because they're all radically different from each other. So you'd have Spock, Riker, Kira, and Chakotay on the main series.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
And the captains are all kind of similar to each other. Like, you really have to sort of dig for reasons as to why the captains are different from each other. They are different, but it's not as obvious, I don't think, as the first officers.
Yeah, the captains are, you know, I mean, they're all kind of like slightly different versions of the same thing.
Yes, yeah.
You know, first officers give you a lot of room to maneuver, you know?
They're totally different characters from each other.
Yeah, I mean, I would throw Michael Burnham into that too. You know? That's a much different character than any of the ones that have come before, more or less.
Let's see here. Yep, that's it. Thank you, Christian. Ken Sito says, past tense, great pair of episodes. The social message might have been a little heavy-handed, but it really feels like it could happen. I've seen this plot in a couple of places. Time-traveling heroes cause the death of an important figure, who they then have to replace. I wonder if Trek did it first. Anyone know? The other point is that I'm Tasmanian, and this is probably the only time my home country got name-checked in an American drama, even if they did diss our weather at the same time. Well, I will have you know that there was an animated Tasmanian Devil cartoon where the theme song was Down in Tasmania, Down in Tasmania. So that's my exposure to Tasmania. So Star Trek did not do it first. I think it was the Tasmanian Devil. I
think that's all of America's only exposure to Tasmania.
I didn't even know
people
lived.
It's lovely, but
I didn't know people lived there.
But I just assume it's a cartoon place
with an animal that can turn into a tornado and spin around and fly up at you. Thank you, Ken Sito. Very much appreciated. Let's see here.
Non sequitur here. I've always wondered, was the Tasmanian Devil, is he like the most inaccurate cartoon animal? Like, most of the cartoon animals are fairly, like, you know, Bugs Bunny likes carrots and he lives in a rabbit hole and shit like that. Daffy Duck.
Looks like a duck.
Yeah, Donald Duck doesn't wear pants like most ducks don't.
Yeah.
But the Tasmanian Devil, I feel like they just had the name and were like, nobody knows what these things are or what they look like. We just kind of can do whatever we want.
Yes, and it's a more intense name than the creature actually looks like. I think they look like weaselly type things, don't they? I think that's what they look like.
Yeah, I don't think they're generally top shaped like the Tasmanian Devil is. The cartoon is.
I'm trying to think now. Besides something like a Pokemon, other cartoon animals that I can think of. Pluto, Goofy. No, it might be the Tasmanian Devil, at least until I think of something as soon as we're done recording, and I'm like, oh, that one's horribly wrong.
I think a close second might be the ecosystem of the ducks in the Disney World, where they're all pilots and rich people.
Sure, and like DuckTales, right.
Yeah. Is there any class system struggle between Donald Duck? Because Donald Duck seems like a working class guy.
He's a sailor.
But most of the other ducks in the Disney World seem to be pretty rich. like the Huey, Dewey, and Louie wouldn't be getting into that shit if they were poor, you know?
Yeah, I was just about to add, Donald Duck is related to Scrooge McDuck, isn't he? He's like his uncle.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, what did Donald Duck do wrong to get that shit end of the stick there? He's got all that money. He takes the kids.
He was realistic about his place in life.
He got sent to a sanctuary city, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. All the ducks, the Disney ducks I can think of off the top of my head: Scrooge McDuck, rich guy;
yep.
Huey, Dewey, and Louie, grandsons of rich guy.
Yeah, grandnephews or something. Yeah.
McDuff, another rich guy. What's his name? The pilot there.
Launchpad.
Launchpad. He's a pilot. That guy's probably got some change. Darkwing Duck, superhero. You can't be a superhero if you're poor.
There's the guy who
becomes... Donald Duck is the working man's cartoon. Can't even afford to buy himself a pair of damn pants.
Nope, doesn't need them.
He's a sailor.
It's that joke. It's like why when Donald Duck doesn't wear pants, but when he gets out of the shower, he puts a towel around his waist, which is one of those interesting things. Past tense 2 from Holly McLaughlin. An America that requires sanctuary cities, districts, after a government institutes policies that make the rich much richer, fiction or current events, you be the judge. Although to be fair, in the show, the poor just talk to the rich. History tells us that in real life, the poor just eventually remember that the rich are, in fact, edible. Yeah, it's funny. The tone, it just comes back to what we were talking about. The tone isn't problematic enough between the two of them, I think, which is for everything else that they got right, they did not predict the amount of anger that we currently have.
There's no real, like, at no point really does anybody in that sanctuary city go like, you fucking rich people, you don't give a shit about us up in your ivory tower and stuff like that. Like, it's all, like, even when they started the riot, right, I wasn't entirely sure that's what was happening or why it was happening.
Right.
Like, I wasn't totally sure what the genesis here was, other than, the fedora guy wanted an extra sandwich or something. I don't know. I was kind of lost a little bit at the beginning about why they were doing this.
It's a good point that they seem to be more mad that the government structure isn't working right than the fact that other people have more money, because they don't really, like, they don't talk about, I don't think they get into the economics of why the jobs have all dried up. I don't think they talk about that. Like, it's funny that, in real life, the reason that this would happen would be technology would improve to the point where people don't have jobs anymore because the technology will do everything. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, in the Star Trek universe, they're pretty much saved by the invention of the replicator, right? Like, the replicator is the thing that fixes everything here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would have liked it if they were like, at some point, they were like, how are we supposed to get jobs when there's a race of genetically created supermen doing all the work?
Right. They'll be played by Brent Spiner.
Yeah, there's just, there's the... I think going more specific, again, would have been a little bit more cliche, but it might just be too blank of a slate to really kind of grasp on, like, really get a I think now that I'm looking back on this, right, like, I enjoyed this episode and I thought it was pretty good, but I think most of that is due to the fact that I was imprinting current events onto it.
Sure, yeah. You're bringing something into it, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about if I take all that stuff out and I just look at it as it is, it's a little bit bland and it's kind of like non-committal. I still like the idea of the paperwork future. It kind of reminds me of Brazil a little bit.
Yep.
And it seems incredibly plausible. But overall, it's just sort of like there's not really a lot of firm ground for this story to stand on.
Do you think the paperwork future is interesting to me? Generally, as you get older, you know, the thing is, like, if you're young and not a liberal. You don't have a heart if you're old and conservative. Whatever that thing is. If you're young and conservative, you don't have a heart. If you're old and liberal, you don't have a brain. I think is like the sort of thing where it's like the paperwork when I was younger never really stuck out to me how much of paperwork is just like the government getting in your way. Kind of like I think they do that here accurately, but it's like when you buy a house, you realize that they control everything about you. Like I'm probably going to come off as some sort of like right-wing radical here where I'm like overthrow the government, but it's like the amount of paperwork to do things to your property is insane. It's like don't I own this? Why? I can understand if down in the future I have to sell this, but shouldn't I just be able to do whatever I want and then have to be legally obligated to tell people who are buying this is what I did?
Right.
As opposed to not being allowed to do something because it doesn't meet a code currently. And it doesn't even get around the problem because if I was even somewhat inclined as a handyman, I could do it all myself very shittily and no one would ever know, and then it would collapse on the person who buys the house after me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not protecting anything. Anyway, that's it for current events with West Teasdale.
Yikes.
Matthew Ross says, Past tense part 1 to 2, the largest amount of technobabble nonsense I've ever heard. Did you know that the Chronoton Heisenberg sassafras with the who's what's its isolinear chip monster is here? Anyway, a social commentary that seems more poignant in the current political spectrum than with the word sanctuary. One odd thing to me is that the conversation of rich folk, you think you'd mention World War III, which allegedly happened in 96, whereas Khan. I guess time travel nonsense fixes all. Interesting storyline, and it kind of does show the futility of trying not to interfere. I blame the Guardian of Forever. I actually enjoyed the story, although a bit silly in retrospect, and why armed guards with only one load of bullets? Not too smart. I don't know what scene you're referring to. Do they run out of bullets at some point?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. The time-traveling bar scenes. A look at the time machine's visual of the store. Obviously, Dax knows how to hack and get men to do her bidding. Luckily, Kira and O'Brien got the block down from the particles. The block down, yeah. This episode's time travel, however, is dealt with later in a humorous side note summed up in a pad. Trying to be serious, but not really.
I think they could have fixed some stuff if they had Cisco and Bashir get their comm badges back.
At what point?
Those, I don't know when it but it was just like, I feel like you could have saved yourself a lot of needless dancing around stuff if you had just had them getting their comm badges back be like an important part of the story, and it's like, right. We can't lock on, blah blah blah, something like that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Instead of having to sleepwalk your way through a way of getting them back, how are they supposed to meet up with Kira to get beamed out of there? Is she going to climb back through the sewer and come back and they're going to hang out on the roof or something? I don't know. That's the whole, when half of your story or a quarter of your story is about, how are we going to find them and get them back? And then they find them and it's the rest of it will just figure out itself.
That's true. I mean, if you figure if Kira and O'Brien can find them in the time period, they would have been able to get them out immediately. So I don't know what would really happen. Let's say
also San Francisco is a big fucking place.
Yeah, it is. I mean, even when it's shot on the New York set of Seinfeld or something, wherever they shot those scenes where Kira and O'Brien beamed down into. But yeah,
I also have a bit of a technical problem with the idea that their comm badges still work, because I think about that stuff as the comm badges need to have some sort of hub to bounce off of.
Right, an infrastructure in place, yeah.
Yeah, I would assume if you're in the past, your Bluetooth is not going to still work if 300 years in the future.
Yeah, you think they're more advanced than walkie-talkies, but apparently they're exactly the same technology as a walkie-talkie.
Yeah, well, whatever, that's fine.
And I think this is the first episode I've seen them deactivate them by double tapping them. Right?
Yeah,
they turn them off at some point.
All the fucking time. That's the thing too. Is at every other point in Star Trek, at least since The Next Generation, at any time, no matter where you are, you don't even have to click the thing, and you hear somebody talk at you. So I just was assumed that they were just on all the time, and that you couldn't actually shut them off.
There was a news story about Alexa, the Echo, the Amazon Echo thing. Will record people talking, and then it randomly sends the recording to a person in your contact list.
Ugh.
And I was like, this is crazy. Like, this can't possibly happen. Amazon is quoted in the thing is like, it's a very tiny chance that this would actually happen. It actually happened to me. I got
No shit.
my old landlord, I got my Echo started glowing a light I had never seen. I was like, what the hell does that mean? So I Google it, and it's like, you have a voicemail. I was like, I have a voicemail on my Amazon. Who the hell sent me a thing? And I open it, or it tells you who it is. It's my old landlord. I'm like, why is my old landlord contacting me on Amazon? And so I click into it, and it's his young kids. They're like 5 years old, and they're talking to Alexa, asking it for things. It recorded them talking, and it sent it to me, and I could hear them clear as day.
Oh, my God.
It was terrifying.
That's fucked up. Like, have you heard the other ones about the about the Alexas that just start laughing? I heard that there are some Alexas that like complete silence, and then they'll just start going. I would throw that shit out the window, through the window.
I think for the recording, I am inclined to believe that it is Alexa mishearing young kids talking.
Most likely, yeah.
That would be because there's always the funny videos on YouTube of kids trying to ask Alexa to do something and it misinterprets what they're talking about. But anyway, it's terrifying that the thing does not ask you to confirm that you want to do that before it sends something off.
Yeah. Not to non sequitur again, but I always find it fascinating to going on a bit of a sci-fi futurist thing here. I watched the HBO remake of Fahrenheit 451 the other day, which was not very good, unfortunately. But they do have a line in there, which is something that I had thought about myself, which is that all of these stories talk about how the government and everybody and all these overbearing entities force all of this surveillance and everything onto the people and Big Brother and all this kind of stuff. There's always like an overlord that's controlling all that stuff. But in reality, we just did that shit to ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
That stuff was not forced on us. We're putting that stuff in our house. Exactly like that. We have things that record us all the time. And now I sound like a crazy conspiracy person.
Well, because what's the thing about Fahrenheit 450? The Fahrenheit 451, I think people always forget that it was, because that's what you're talking about. The books were not taken from them, right? They sort of willingly gave up reading. I think in the thing he says that this is kind of a slam against the comic industry, but people were only allowed to read comics for a little bit, and then they took the comics away.
Well, when it was written, that's understandable. But
right, yeah.
I mean, the thing there is like it started with censorship. Basically, is people decided we can't have this word in this book, so then they took that out, and then it kept escalating from there to the point where just books in general are bad.
Right.
And it was not a government thing. It was a people started thing, which
it's cultural. The people decided to sort of make this the policy.
Right. Yeah. They actually do one cool thing in the remake where they have like classic works of literature, but it's like one page of emojis.
Oh, interesting.
Like, that's kind of interesting. So like they're still putting these books and stuff, quote unquote books out there, stories out there. But it's a version where someone has decided this is all you need, and they break it down to the most inoffensive way possible, which is just telling you the story through emojis. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting.
The Ray Bradbury take there is actually that you bring it up. What this episode is missing for me.
Yes. Yeah.
It is missing how we got to that point, and the how of getting there is interesting. Bradbury made it interesting by not making it a government thing, like just like you have to be concerned about how far you're willing to give up stuff.
Right.
And this episode should have done something similar to that. Like you needed more information about why these riots are going to happen.
Right.
Kyle Barrett says, past tense, you think DS9 would be the place to you'd think DS9 wouldn't be the place to tell these sorts of stories, considering it's far from Earth and has its own species and societies to comment on. But somehow returning to Earth for a more obvious social commentary works very well for the show. And this isn't even the best example. Despite the ridiculous names of Gimmies, Dims, and Ghosts, it's an episode that works best when it fully embraces its serious tone, and I feel the fun interludes of O'Brien and Kira jumping around in time hurt the episode. And while and I'm sure it's no coincidence that the cast members of color are sent to the sanctuary camp while Jadzia is whisked away to a fancy party where the most difficult choice is whether or not to treat herself to a canap. I don't know what the word is. I apologize, I'm ignorant. It's also a fascinating time period for the continuity nerds like me. It's set after the eugenics wars of the 90s and 2 years before World War III breaks out. So maybe you could argue if that's the official timeline, this event probably led to the events that led to World War III, I guess. It's just the sort of society breakdown. Kyle said something that I wanted to talk about. Oh,
does that make Gabriel Bell like Franz Ferdinand essentially?
Yeah, I that would, if I had to write a story to tie that in, that's what I would do. I would make that this Bell Riot, while it was the instigating event or initiating action, caused a lot of problems down the line too. What did you notice the show didn't bring it up, but the two darker skinned characters are the ones that are put in the sanctuary city.
Oh yeah, good point.
Episode doesn't mention Jadzia being a white woman is allowed to sort of join the elite of society.
I will say, as I was watching this, I was like, this is really accurate. This feels like it's something that could be plausible. But realistically and more cynically, there's probably way too many white people in this sanctuary city.
Yeah.
Like that's just how it is, and that's depressing as hell.
They didn't really comment on it, which I thought was, if they did it subtly, they did it very subtly for Star Trek compared to how sledgehammery the rest of the message is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly interesting, and I don't know if that's because they wanted to. Bashir kind of has to go because he is, as we were talking about, that character who needs the positive perspective on things. Mm-hmm. And Cisco has to go because he's the lead of the whole thing. That's it for the Patreon comments. Thank you guys for supporting the show. Thank you for commenting. Clay, what are you going to give this one on a scale of 1 to 5?
I really liked the first half. And I thought, as it tends to do in Star Trek, the second half didn't really pay off. Well, I don't know. Payoff isn't the right word. It just sort of was what it was. But I enjoyed it. Again, I think my enjoyment level was heightened because I was projecting stuff onto it. I'm going to say 3.
Okay.
I was originally going to go 4 until we really started talking about it, but then I was like, yeah, I think I'm kind of projecting a little bit. Yeah, I would say 3.5. Yeah, 3.
Cool. Yeah, I think you generally like it more than I did. I didn't really like it. I'm going to give it a 2. I think that what you're saying, the most interesting part is the fact that they kind of did a world that's in our near future that is plausible at this point. Like they weren't too crazy with that. And I like the world that they set up. I just don't think that the storyline itself is all that great. Shakes working around it.
Yeah, there was a certain point where I was watching it and I was thinking, like, this is usually the kind of thing that I don't like, where it's Star Trek where they've gone back to some future version of the present. So it's like all, it's the gray future with jumpsuits and it feels really low budget and stuff. And I think just because it was Star Trek made that not stand out to me as much.
Yeah.
So I think if this had been literally anything else, I probably would have liked it a lot less.
Yeah, right.
If this hadn't been Star Trek, if this had been some other sci-fi thing, given
Sliders.
all of what's that? Sliders, yeah. Hey man, Sliders was great. At least that's how I remember it when I was like 12.
Yes. It's a great concept.
Yeah, excellent. I always thought about
Tracy Torme, our old friend Tracy Torme.
Oh, no kidding.
I think he's the creator of that show. Yeah.
I even at the time watching it was thinking like, man, there's going to be a time where they jump to a version of the future where like the only thing that's different is that zippers on pants are upside down or something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, not the future. The alternate universe, not the future. Yeah, if this was literally any other sci-fi thing, the amount of holes just in presenting the concept would have just really turned me off, I think.
Yeah, I think so much of it, maybe this isn't a problem, but so much of it depends on being Star Trek. That this is going to lead to something. If this was like a one-off Twilight Zone, I think you'd be like, this is really underwhelming. Like, they're not talking about anything.
Right, yeah.
And maybe it ties in. We talked with Darren about how the episodes of DS9 at this point really don't stand alone. Even if they're non-serialized, they're like, they depend so much on the lore of Star Trek and the lore of the series, and I think that's what happens.
Well, I mean, at this point,
it's a lot of Star Trek. Yeah,
from Deep Space Nine on, really, you can't escape that with anything. You know.
Yep.
Like you don't have Enterprise unless you're trading on the lore of Star Trek. You don't have. I mean, Voyager is kind of its own thing, but even there, it's like, I'm sure a lot of that is weighted by the continuation of the concept. God knows Discovery is. So I think that's just something that comes with the territory with Star Trek now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
I think there is maybe I would look at it, unfortunately. There seems to be a critical mass of stuff in one franchise that I'm willing to put up with, I guess.
Yeah.
And you can hit that, depending on what the franchise is, you can get a little bit more, a little bit less with it, but it seems to hit that point.
Another reason, not to go back to this another reason why I wish they had gone in the future in Discovery. I mean, they could have established a Star Trek thing and then just made it wholly their own.
Yeah. You never brought up that point. That's a good point.
That's a joke, right?
Yeah, obviously, Discovery should have been in the future, and the reason it's not is because, as you said, they need to trade on TOS. They need to pull Star Trek into Discovery to make people care. They think they need to do that. Let's see here. I think that's it. We're done. I'm going to give it a 2. Clay will give it a 3. It's the last 2-parter of Star Trek DS9 that we're going to run into. Well, if you guys like supporting the show, you can do that on all the social media links. Patreon will be there, patreon.com/thepenskyfile. We should have the Watchmen up at some point. Real Ripe and Real Rotten will be coming back.
As soon as we can block off a weekend to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to the Sanctuary City just so I have some time to watch Watchmen.
Yeah, what if the riot is because the only movie in Sanctuary City is the ultimate cut of Watchmen?
Patreon.com/thepenskyfile. Real Ripe and Real Rotten will be back too. It's just the heat of summer. We're a little bit behind, but Star Trek continues unabated. And then that's about it. Well, Clay, thanks for coming on. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about this episode or anything else going on.
No. Hopefully our Batman podcast should be coming out sooner than later. Finally. Just kind of retool that stuff. But the Bat-Ass podcast is still alive and coming. So
yep. I think I alerted the patrons to that recently. So there,
cool.
I got a couple comments. People are anxiously awaiting it. So it should be eagerly received.
I can't wait for it to not live up to whatever hype is built into it.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And we'll be back with another DS9 episode after this. So.
Oh, sorry. One more thing.
Go ahead.
So the book that I do, Poser, is coming out, is available in previews. So if you have a comic shop that you go to, tell them that if you want to check out my book, the first 2 issues are available for pre-order and stuff. So you can tell them that you're looking for a book called Poser from Waxwork Comics, and they should be able to get it for you if that's something you're interested in.
Interesting. All right, so check out Poser. Is the first one available for general buy, or they just do this pre-ordering at this point?
You can get the first one through Waxwork directly.
Yeah,
but the pre-order is for just the comic. It won't be coming with a record, and that will be stuff that goes directly to comic stores. So if you prefer to go to stores, and it's a cheaper version too, and if you don't care about the record, you can get it. It's the easiest way to get it through a comic store.
Gotcha. All right, guys, thank you very much. We will see you next time.